independent review into Australia's response to COVID-19 has found governments and health departments made mistakes.
Now to matters closer to home, and Victoria Police is again trying to rebuild their image after enthusiastically serving as Dan Andrews' COVID enforcers for more than 2 years, where they terrorised pregnant women for Facebook posts, harassed little old ladies on park benches and shot scores of protesters with non-lethal rounds.
Australians are being encouraged to come forward for their third jab, and they're responding with over 80% of eligible people having their booster shot as of Sunday. Joining me live now is the COVID-19 Taskforce Commander, Lieutenant General John Fruin.
It is so easy to forget, and in fact we are actively discouraged to forget and to move on and to look the other way and not consider the fact that for a moment in history, in 2021 to 22, roughly, I lost track of time over those years, we actually came as close as possible to mandating an untried drug.
So, I just want to touch on some events from the past that might be considered a crime that's being excused as some sort of corporate mishap. We need to adjust those corporate responsibilities a little bit because we screwed up. But no one's pointing the finger and calling it for what it is. It's a serious, heinous criminal offence across this international scope, across multiple countries in what one could consider an empire. And it's up to all of you to start reporting those crimes. So you can do that here. You can investigate that a little bit further, and we'll start to discuss how to form an offence and report it to the Australian Federal Police. We'll show you how to point the finger at that police officer that has committed that offence. Just following orders was no excuse here in this realm. Those politicians are well documented. Those ministers of state trying to remove all of the evidence off the internet of all those threats that they made. Remember that New South Wales Health Minister? She looked like she had the devil eyes. Looked like she was under someone's thumb so hard that it might have been at the threat of her life. And that's the rule set, isn't it? That everyone agreed to play by. So here we look at some offences, some past incidences where they excused themselves from the law, whereas the engineer's case demonstrates very clearly who has the upper hand here, especially in those laws signed under Great Seals, right, with documents called certificates of indemnity, or were they oaths of fidelity? Let's read this here, because the Hague Conventions came from this, didn't it? How did that all occur after what we just went through 1939, 1940 in those maps? We'll discuss that in a upcoming video in relation to what went on from 1939 onwards. But here we look at some evidences.
We do have a clear plan to see Australia through. Our plan has 3 goals. 1, protect Australians' health. 2, secure Australians' jobs and livelihoods. And 3, set Australia up to bounce back stronger when the crisis is over. Firstly, to protect Australians. We were one of the first countries to recognise the seriousness of the coronavirus. We quickly established travel bans from the most affected countries and scaled up our screening and protection on our borders. We evacuated Australians from virus hotspots and set up quarantine facilities. And we have funded a $2.4 billion National Health Response Plan to set up more than 100 pop-up clinics and to provide extra support for aged care facilities, increase funding for public hospitals and boost our national medical stockpile for essential medicines and masks. Secondly, to keep Australians in jobs and businesses in business, we have today announced a $17.6 billion economic stimulus plan. We're subsidising half the wages of 117,000 apprentices in small businesses. We're providing one-off $750 payments to more than 6 million Australians to spend in our economy now. Almost 2.5 million pensioners will receive this support. There's direct cash support of up to $25,000 for small and medium-sized businesses that employ over 7 million Australians to boost their cash flow. And we're backing businesses to keep investing by increasing tax incentives to help them buy new equipment now. And thirdly, once the virus has run its course, we are making sure Australia can bounce back strongly. For the most affected regions and industries, like tourism and Upper North Queensland, there is a special $1 billion fund to support targeted local recovery plans. And as our economy bounces back, which it will, so will our budget, because we have not loaded up spending off into the future.
In news that will make children happy all over the state, Santa Claus has been granted an exemption to enter New South Wales. Minister for Health, Brad Hazzard, has granted the exemption for Santa, all 9 reindeers and as many elves as are required to deliver gifts on Christmas Eve without having to quarantine for 14 days. As we all know, Santa has significant magical powers, and it turns out that these extend to him being able to travel without transmitting COVID-19. Santa has safely delivered presents to Australian children during previous pandemics, and this one will be no different.
Joining me live now is the COVID-19 Taskforce Commander, Lieutenant General John Fruin. You've had quite a job over the last couple of months. It is not over, General. You know that. The booster shots are rolling out. So can you talk to us about the uptake and if there's any supply issues?
Yeah, hi Laura, great to be with you. Now look, the uptake on boosters has been fantastic. We've now delivered over 1 million booster shots over the last week or so. Of course, you'd know that last Sunday, ATAGI shifted the advice to change the duration from 6 months to 5 months from people's second dose to their booster shot. That's brought in many more million people who are eligible immediately. Supply isn't the issue. We've got, many thousands of distribution points across the country, and we're working really hard with particularly those GPs and pharmacists who are carrying the load on this to get the supply to them as they need it.
Okay, well, the reality isn't quite matching what you're saying there in terms of supply, because there have been some isolated incidents, but significant ones where people have lined up, they haven't been able to get their booster shot, pharmacies have run out. So what's going on there?
This is the roadmap that lays out exactly how we will approach the national rollout through the rest of the course of this year. It lays out some key milestones, also helps people understand exactly how we are approaching prioritisation, and how we will work towards the targets towards the end of the year. I'm also pleased to note that yesterday was another record day. We did over 213,000 doses in a single day. So that means we're now up over 12.8 million doses nationally. We are at 80% first dosing for over 70s. We're at 60% first dosing for over 50s. And in the general population above 16, we're now at 40% first dosing, and 20% of Australians are now fully vaccinated.
See, so we can clearly see that they are trying to excuse themselves from what they've done, knowing full well what they've done, all the way to the tippity top, where those CEOs and those executives in those pharmaceutical companies sit, have all committed international criminal offences against all of you. And we spoke about how you were a victim here of the mind, how they have mind manipulated you into a belief since 1939. See, they re-educated you under Hague Conventions. Right, this time we have a red one, not a blue one. A red book. And this came after, so it's the same book because we went through it. It's just missing a few pages, and it's got a couple of additional pages, but it starts with the Southern Heavens. It's got no addition list. 1940. So we don't have a historical list of when this was printed beforehand. The cover's slightly different. It doesn't have an addition on the front cover either. And same map as before, except, oh, now that there's no Commonwealth, there's the world and political and communications. Same map as before. Exactly the same map as before. Just all of the history there for the Commonwealth Atlas has been removed. They re-educated you to believe that you were something you were not, so you would forget who you were in all of this. And that Bible and that God structure laid it all down at the end of a World War I, didn't it? Leading to those imperial conferences and sovereignty, which has been invaded and manipulated in the demise of a currency and a people mind manipulated into bondage, debt bondage. And this is what your police do. They enslave you with the peonage, as we discussed in the previous video. And you can see the evil structure that came out of Scott Morrison's office into the States to allow all this to occur in the first place might demonstrate that a command was put in over a governor of state. The governor's emergency services taken away, and some federal line that isn't federal because it's national put in its place. Some line of authority into some sort of state command.
Now, on bulk purchasing of supplies, stop hoarding. I can't be more blunt about it. Stop it.
Now, look, the uptake on boosters has been fantastic. We've now delivered over 1 million booster shots over the last week or so. Of course, you'd know that last Sunday, ATAGI shifted the advice to change the duration from 6 months to 5 months from people's second dose to their booster shot.
You know, after 8,500 people on what was then our biggest domestic support operation, Operation Bushfire Assist, we've rolled straight into Operation COVID Assist. We've now had more than 13,000 people involved in COVID Assist, and we still have 1,600 people across the country, some of them away from their friends and family for a second Christmas in a row. Massive undertaking, but I'm extremely proud of everything that all of our people have achieved.
Some sort of state command, which we've already discussed. And these are legal ramifications here, because we're looking at a St. Edward's Crown and everyone that operated under it being obligated to a set of rules that it brought here. There's a double-bladed sword here. There are so many things on the table in relation to debts and contracts that are cycling around that might give you an indication as to the end of something. Roe v. Wade might give you an indication as to the end of contract of something. Someone's inability to do those sorts of things to a population anymore. This is an international game that I don't think your politicians are very aware of when they support sides that are linked to sides that they don't know. And they refuse to anchor with their own side in God. And this leads to all of these crimes being carried out.
Fires, fights, flash grenades on city streets. Protests in the middle of Melbourne against an international weapons expo turned violent.
Get back!
The real disruptors, the real opposers of peace are the people assembled in that room.
Get your booster or miss out.
I think we're very close to a change in policy that will simply reflect the fact that in order to be fully protected, you need to have 3 doses, not 2 plus an optional extra.
If you make the judgment to not get vaccinated and you reckon you can wait out us or the publican or whoever you want to think you're waiting out, you won't wait out the virus, because the virus will be here for a long time and your only protection against it is being vaccinated. Just so that no one's in any doubt about the fact that this is an outbreak and is moving to become a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and just confirms that this really is a pandemic now of the unvaccinated. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This is now a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
This has in every way become a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That's my line to you.
And I will speak in English so there are no misunderstandings. Was the Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market? If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market.
It is so easy to forget. And in fact, we are actively discouraged to forget and to move on and to look the other way and not consider the fact that for a moment in history, in 2021 to 22, roughly, I lost track of time over those years, we actually came as close as possible to mandating an untried drug to the population that was rushed through, do you remember, at the speed of science. That was according to Pfizer executive Janine Small. She was making a statement to the EU Parliament in October 22. Well, it's now 2024 and the effects of the speed of science are only just really becoming apparent.
We can take this action now because we have worked hard to bring the budget back into balance, to maintain our AAA credit rating, and work with the state governments to provide a world-class health system. Now, I know many Australians are anxious about this, and we do still have a long way to go. But be assured, we are taking action and we have a clear plan.
The state governments could have handled the pandemic better.
I agree with you, Nat. Hindsight is a marvellous thing. The only thing I would say is that there's nothing in, like the recommendations are all very good and the findings, I think there's nothing new in it. A lot of this was said at the time, and so I think one of the learnings we should take out of it is that really we need governments also to listen to us at the time. And, you know, we knew about the unfairness, the lack of compassion. And so I think those things over the pandemic, could we have listened a bit better at the time? There's nothing new in it. The call for public, the modelling being made public, better rules around National Cabinet, all of the recommendations, people, the most vulnerable being unfairly targeted. We do know all of this. And I think the one thing that politicians can take out of it is that all of them, because we all saw it in all of those press conferences, that the politicking was out of control.
There is so much to say, so much ground to cover. It can't be done in short videos. The government knows its position in these rules. The government knows what that red flag means. The government should see what the states have done. The government should stop all of its propaganda against what is considered to be a right of self-determination in that international law. Against what kind of government? And this is something we need to venture into because of all this law-tarding that has confused all of you into what this monster actually is. So we've demonstrated very clearly the line of authority that exists in the Constitution at the preamble under the blessing of Almighty God. So if in that true line of authority would obviously adhere to the Constitution, but we have a discrepancy, don't we? We should investigate this further because they sat in the High Court determining all of this a little while ago, didn't they? Because they were trying to hide something, weren't they? So, Commonwealth of Australia Constitution Act Section 44, disqualification. Any person who, is under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power, or is a subject or a citizen, or entitled to the rights or privileges of a subject or a citizen of a foreign power, or 2, is attainted of treason or has been convicted and is under sentence or subject to be sentenced for any offence punishable under the law of the Commonwealth or of a state by imprisonment for 1 year or longer. Now, 3 is the Rodney, is an undischarged bankrupt or insolvent. 4, holds any office of profit under the Crown or any pension payable during the pleasure of the Crown out of any of the revenues of the Commonwealth. Or 5, has any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in any agreement with the public service of the Commonwealth otherwise than as a member and in common with the other members of an incorporated company consisting of more than 25 persons, shall be incapable of being chosen or of sitting as a senator or a member of the House of Representatives. So, do we have a conflict of interest if I show you this picture here, transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development within the Department of Economic and Social Affairs in the United Nations? That's quite interesting. So, would this be some sort of obedience? Adherence? Are you adhering to someone's agenda outside of the rule of God? Are you adhering to some sort of sustainable development goal in line with transforming our world, being our Constitution under the blessing of Almighty God? Would that be any of you as ministers or senators in an allegiance to the United Nations instead of the Constitution? Would that be any of you in obedience to agendas that are outside of the interests of the people of the Commonwealth? Would that you be adhering to someone else's agenda that is outside of the Constitution? Would that be attainting treason? Would that be committing an act of treason, trying to undermine the blessing of Almighty God by transforming that world? It might start paying to not play with it, with the RBAs, and start circulating those silvers around before they encapsulate you in some digital foreign world that's snappity snap. You can't participate, you can't drive, you can't do anything when you're the power of your land and they're the servants you appointed to govern your assets. And look what they've done to your assets. Look at all the privatisation that's gone on. Look at the invasion into your families. Look at the invasion into your private property. Look at the invasion into your very mind by the TV and all of the spewing out that these politicians do on a constant basis, like robots on Twitter. 40 times a day. So people just sucked into a world arguing with nonsense and no one's there to respond. Go and do it on the internet. Send us an email. Go into the metaverse where no one cares. That's what they want from you. Step into the real world. Recognise what they've done to you. Recognise that you're the victim of a crime and report those crimes to the Australian Federal Police.
It has a private benefit. It protects me if I get COVID. If I get COVID, I'm less likely to die from getting it. But it doesn't have a very large public benefit. If I'm vaccinated, I don't protect you very much, John, because I can still get COVID. I can still pass it to you. It's very different than many other vaccines. On the question of safe, we've learned that that roughly speaking, there are populations of people for whom the vaccine produces some side effects that we didn't expect.
And partnerships with companies like Pfizer have been key to the progress we've made. And for example, Gavi got started, actually announced here at Davos. One of the most important vaccines, the one that saved the most lives of all, is the pneumococcus vaccine. And Pfizer was the innovator there with their Prevnar product. And they've been providing that at low cost so that it can get out to all the children of the world.
We shouldn't have to rely on the likes of Bill Gates, who wrote a book in 2022, I remind you, called How to Prevent the Next Pandemic. I haven't read it, funnily enough. I can probably guess what might be in there, but I don't think it will be an awful lot about how to prevent the next pandemic. It might be about how to handle the next pandemic when it mysteriously comes along. But he talks about enhanced quarantine techniques and guess what? Investment in vaccine research. Funny that. But we shouldn't have to rely on Bill Gates to tell us. The COVID inquiry in the UK should be doing a much better job. It shouldn't be costing the billions of pounds that it's costing. It shouldn't be taking the many, many years that it's going to take, because the next pandemic, in inverted commas, may just come along if the powers that be, if the globalists, if the drug companies, if the medical healthcare regulatory authorities, if there are biddable MPs and stupid MPs who believe what they're told, decide that we're in the next pandemic, then we could all be right there. And then what would we do? What would then happen to the dissenting voices next time round? Are enough people awake to the element of control that is exacted as soon as that trigger is pulled on the next pandemic?
Listen carefully as to why mRNA could be a problem. And this is just based on the physiology as to how modified RNA works. You have to realize that normally cells produce RNA, messenger RNA, what we call mRNA, when they are trying to make proteins from the nucleus. So it's transcribed from DNA into RNA. The messenger RNA is then converted into a protein. Okay? That's the normal fashion. And what the vaccine has done is that they have modified the RNA for the protein that they want. So they wanted to make a spike protein. And because normal RNA is destroyed very quickly, they've modified it with methyl pseudouridine. That's the principle with regards to modified RNA. So don't call it mRNA, because mRNA is messenger RNA, which is normal in a cell. Modified RNA with methyl pseudouridine is not normally in a cell. The problem then becomes, if this has evaded the innate cellular immunity, because normally a cell assumes that if RNA is present, it's from a virus, and so therefore it will want to block it. Now, because it is evading that immune system, what happens if this cell doesn't die? Will it continue to produce spike protein indefinitely, especially if this is an immune cell? These are the kinds of questions that really need to be clarified, because without that clarification, we don't know what the longer term implications are.
Now, on a last note, the Australian Federal Police should look into Daniel Andrews a little bit deeper, because I've just given you a command line, a command authority, a command responsibility that hid and covered it all up while all of those poisony things were going on, which are also considered to be criminal offences in that criminal code that you sort of drafted and codified together as your rules of engagement, I suppose. Rules of engagement. So if that cover-up is real, then what's behind the cover-up might be real too. Until next time, have fun. The rules are turning around like a roundabout, and the witches gather around the cauldron.